Hello, welcome to our State and Local Government Driving Digital Transformation Summit. We have a great subject today, data analytics to improve health outcomes, public health outcomes in a crisis. We have two participants for our discussion today who really are strong practitioners in this area that have a lot of experience. So without further ado, I'm going to jump forward and have them introduce themselves, and then we'll look at our agenda. My name's Ed Blake, and I've been facilitating all of these sessions and looking forward to another great session today. Here we go, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, my name's Daniel Pascal. I am managing consultant, a practice manager here at Catapult for the data and AI practice. I focus really on the state and local government space and have worked with many health departments across the country working on data solutions. So looking forward to the conversation.
And my name is Alex Carvalho. I'm an architect at Catapult in the data and AI practice, and I work with our clients both in the government space as well as commercial space and developing solutions to help them solve their data issues.
Thanks, gentlemen. So now we'll look at our agenda. I'll ask you to just walk through this, and then we can start addressing the first issue on the list.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, in working with health departments, both, you know, state, local, government level, even some in the federal space, we've learned a lot. And when it comes to data, when it comes to crisis response data, it's really defining what data is out there that you could use, and what data that is going to provide the results you're looking for is one of the biggest challenges in getting started. And so we thought it'd be a good place to start this conversation. Alex, thoughts on data as specific to crisis response?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a challenge for the government space, just because there's so many different types of data out there that's available to them, but none of it is readily available. They have to go out to a third-party site, or they have to ingest files from a government agency to get that information. They have to do some manipulation with it to get it into a format that they need. So any way to speed that process up when a crisis is going on, that is definitely something that our government clients look for.
You know, in defining data too, it's probably worth really defining a crisis response solution. You know, why would a local government need a crisis response type solution? And to give you an example, you know, one of the cities we work with that's along the Gulf Coast, we worked with them to build a data warehouse specifically for responding to crisis situations which happen along the Gulf Coast, from hurricanes to air quality events, tropical storms, stuff like that. Where, you know, will cause flooding, cause power outages, and local governments, they need to go out and respond to these, send their auditors out to verify that restaurants that have lost power, you know, are fully operational before they open the doors, and food hasn't spoiled, and all those sorts of things. So there's lots of things that local governments need to figure out. They're usually understaffed and trying to stretch their resources as far as they can, and a data warehouse can be really helpful in that respect. And so, as Alex mentioned, there's, you know, data sources come in from kind of a lot of areas. If you're a bigger city, you know, you might be looking at national data for some things. You might have local, if say it's air quality, you might have local devices out there pulling in air quality information that you're directly sourcing and pulling into your data warehouse. So it could be this combination between, you know, national data, local data, and even you know, proprietary data.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, when you have a weather event, like you mentioned, it's even more crucial that you have good information that you're getting from these sources. because you know, a lot of times they're using this information to decide where to put their response centers out in for crisis situations like a flood, for example. And so you want to make sure that you're not in the path of any kind of flooding when you put that response center there. So that information is critical to understand what data it's giving you and understand how to read it. It's equally as important.
Yeah. Any examples, Alex, of some pretty common data sources and associated with crisis data? One that comes to mind for me in Texas is TCEQ.
Mhm.
But I know we've worked with them, but we've worked with a lot of other groups as well.
Yeah, TCEQ definitely has a quite a wide variety of different air quality as well as chemical tracking information. But there's also different monitoring stations in the Air Now network, as well as even some counties on the Gulf Coast have their own flood control districts that have API-based solutions to watch the flood gauges and the rain gauges when you have a water event or a hurricane. So those are common, as well as even the federal government has quite a bit as well in the general same kind of thing, weather related information.
I know when, Alex, as you and I have been working over the last couple of years with various state and local clients, identifying this data is important, and it's a big piece of it. But then once we start seeing this data, pulling it in to a staging area, um, it's creates kind of the next phase of challenges that we often go through, and that's getting that data ready to be used. What maybe some good stories on what we've experienced recently?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what we see as the biggest challenge is you're bringing in data from different systems, and each one of those systems has different level of data quality. Usually, your information from your weather monitoring or from your flood districts, that's coming from precision instruments out in the field, sending you recordings in a very defined and consistent format. What and then you tie that into a kind of a permitting application or something that is user entered information. That's usually where we see the big disconnect, and it makes it harder to try to connect those two pieces together. So we have a lot of custom logic that we can build into place and use some machine learning to help kind of bridge that gap. So where you can bring more than one source of information together, right? Sometimes you have a weather event, you're going to have flooding, you're also going to have rainfall. Those are two different measurements coming from different types of devices. So to bring all that into one central place, that's kind of what the governments need so they can determine where they need to place their responses in the right place locations.
And our clients always need to respond to this data really quickly. So it becomes critical that that data is cleaned, it's organized and orchestrated in such a way that they can use it, or else we really miss the mark on these data solutions. Um, it, I know, building the data model is a big part of it, but that oftentimes, at this stage of a project, we may, sit with the client and take a good hard look at the data quality coming in and figuring out if we want to take any extra time and really getting that data ready for production use, especially considering the kind of critical nature of the activities that take place based on what this data is telling them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one of the things we like to do is we like to set up the solution to work all the time, not just during a crisis, so that you're always testing that logic and it's kind of a continual loop. What we like to do is build in a separate schedule. So when you have a crisis, you ramp up, you get that information more frequently than you would normally, but you're still getting it every day, a few hours a day, once a day, depending on what your needs are, just so that we can train those logic and get better quality as we go along rather than just do a big project up front or a big project at the end. We find that it works a lot quicker and it gets more value to our government clients if we can provide that kind of in step with it as we're building it out.
Yeah, and you touched on that with the SLAs. that is part of your planning phase. You know, you should consider both times of crisis and times of non-crisis. You know, how quickly do you need that data? The turnaround time should go way up during a crisis, and so if you have those SLAs defined in advance, you can account for it in your automations.
Right, and you really need a framework that can scale and can grow as you need it. You know, a lot of frameworks that are very rigid aren't going to give you that flexibility, whereas a cloud-based type solution will give you that kind of flexibility when you need it.
Now, you know, both, you know, looking at common integration challenges, we've deal with these both commercial and local government. We've dealt with a lot of the same challenges, but there probably is, you know, more variety, I would say, that we deal with on the state local government side of things. So it's not always just an API call. You know, we find ourselves in a lot of different situations, just trying to meet the client where they are. Some of our clients are further along the maturity scale as it relates to data than others. And so, you know, where they are in their maturity of, you know, their data sources and their technology staff, you know, will play into kind of our plan on how we integrate the data. It needs to be something that they can maintain, and you know that they can, you know, continue to service over time. So I don't know. With that in mind, Alex, you know, we've kind of seen the full gambit of integration challenges over the years, but any stand out to you?
Um, Definitely working with the weather type of information. That's a lot of information that comes in quickly in rapid short time frames. Usually the increments are 5 or 10 minutes for each measurement. So that's a could potentially be a lot of data coming in a very short time. So being able to have a framework that can handle that load, that burst when you need it to come into your warehouse, that's been one of the significant challenges that we've had to come across. Pretty consistent across most of the data sources during a crisis situation.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, worth mentioning, you know, from, you know, dealing with APIs down to something as simple as a CSV file being pushed out to an FTP site somewhere. We've seen it all, and you know, I think in the SLG space, it's just good to keep in mind that um, being versatile and meeting the client where they are is going to be helpful. Take them along that roadmap journey, and iterate to improve over time. But you know that when they've got critical data like that, sometimes you've got to kind of mix it up as far as what you're willing to do to integrate that data.
Yeah, and I think too, you know, you hit it right on the head. The people that know this data are the people that are working there, but right, unfortunately for them, they're having to go to 5 or 6 different places to gather all this data manually, put it into an Excel spreadsheet to kind of then give them some of what the information that they're looking for, but it's never an exact picture, right? So being able to think outside of that process a little bit. We know it works manually when they do it, but if you can figure out how to automate that information and bring it into one place, you're now taking hours away from someone that could then be pulled over into doing other things during those crisis situations. So it's definitely a value for the planning part of it.
Well, with those challenges in mind, let's take a look at, you know, a kind of a high level solution image here, and we can talk through this a little bit.
Mhm.
So, you know, when we work with health departments, we we'll start off, if it's a greenfield situation where they're working against disparate local data sources and kind of going through the motions that Alex just described, you know, aggregating as much as they can in Excel and building out the reports in Excel, then, you know, we're going in and, you know, starting with building out their Azure environment and getting their Azure landing zone in place and their data platform in place. And so there's that kind of common, and that goes across any client, state, local government, or commercial, where those are our early motions. But when you are dealing with a health department in a state and local government space, it's one of those kind of edge cases where, if you can use the commercial cloud, you're going to get a richer feature set. And if you go to the Gov cloud, it's going to be a little less feature rich. So it's really going to come down to understanding your data and HIPAA requirements and any regulatory compliance considerations will be part of that decision-making process. We actually have a separate video on that if you want to dive into that a little deeper. But as it relates to a scenario where we've got the data platform in place, maybe you can kind of take us through what kind of architecture someone might expect with a crisis response solution.
Yeah, sure. So in this diagram on the left-hand side, those are all the different sources of information that you could bring into a warehouse. You got log files, media files, text CSV files. You may have a database or an API that you're hitting. There's a tool in the Azure tool belt called Azure Data Factory that allows us to bring that information in its rawest form to get it into the data warehouse. And from there, you can have multiple paths. You could go take that data to a data warehouse and then serve it up for reports and through Power BI or analysis services. You could train a machine learning model to pick out trends. Really, your options are limitless once it's in that central location. And then people can then go do research over time. When we had, if let's say that you had a hurricane or something and you got all this information for a hurricane during that 4 or 5 days when it's raining heavy and you get a lot of flooding, all that information can stay there so that you could then train a model against that information to see, okay, based on this previous historical information, where am I most likely to need my resources to go to serve the most people in our community? So getting that information, getting that history, a lot of it resides in shared network drives. A lot of times is what we see with our clients. So it's somewhat centralized, but not easy to work with. Whereas with a data warehouse, it puts it all out there with our tool set, with the Microsoft platform, and allows you to do many things quickly with the data that you've ingested into your warehouse.
Yeah, and I would say, just hearing feedback from our clients who we've helped build out these crisis response solutions, getting all the data in one place is the big initial win. But there's usually some training that we do around Power BI to help our clients who are transitioning to Power BI the first time ramp up there quickly. And I think that's helpful. It helps the client with adoption, and that adoption then feeds the kind of roadmap iterations to improve the warehouse. We take a real you know good MVP approach when we do these, where we're trying to, with the initial push to production, really meet a particular use case so that people can start using the solution right away. And then, based on the success of that minimum viable product or MVP, it'll start to garner some support for using this tool, and we'll kind of iterate to improve, add more data sources. And as you bring additional data sources into the data warehouse, you're bringing in additional, audience to use that data. And we'll, we make a point to ensure that the client at least has a plan for helping ramp up those new users to the solution, getting them trained up on Power BI. Alex has done a lot of demos of the solution after they're done, so people just understand, how they're put together and how to use them. So the whole adoption side of the house is been particularly important as we're moving people off Excel and onto Power BI, and especially when it's these time critical decisions they're having to make as it relates to crisis response scenarios. Ensuring they're trained up and ready to go, so when a crisis does hit, they're confident in going in there and getting the information they need using these modern tools.
Yeah, and I think too, just to piggyback on that, the modern tools like a Power BI, it's a more interactive visualization tool, whereas they're used to just generating reports and then reading from those reports and making some calculations or based on that. These tools that they have nowadays, it allows you to kind of you pick the different parameters that you want and you can see the results on the screen. So a lot of our clients will take some of the data from their data warehouse, overlay it on a map of their region, their city, their county, where, if there's a flood in a certain area, they can expand that area to be like a hotspot on a heat map. And then that's just one quick way that they can visualize, oh, we got problems over here in the southeast corner of our area. Let's go make sure we have enough resources for that area. So just definitely, like Danny said, just getting that information, understanding it, and you have to have a warehouse is great, but if you don't have anything to visualize out of it or come out of it, it's not really doing its job well. You have to get that adoption and continually adopt it and continually innovate it to get the benefits of it.
Yeah, I think that's been critical to the success of our deployments or our implementations is really just not walking away after we send something to production, but sticking with the client, working with them to continue to iterate to improve and to continue to drive adoption. Um, it's been critical, and then the other half of it is the more of these you deliver, you really start to become familiar with a lot of the data sources that get reused in these scenarios, and you know understand understanding who the contacts are at some of these organizations where you might be getting data, and understanding how they deliver data from prior engagements really helps us kind of accelerate the process of helping the client identify their data sources and how to ingest those. So a lot of front end help and a lot of back end help to make these successful.
Yep.
Um, anything else on the topic of the solution here? Otherwise, we could probably just wrap this up.
I think we pretty much touched on all the areas.
That's great.
Yeah, Edwin,
Go
we
ahead.
will turn it over to you.
Okay. Thanks very much, guys. That was a great session. Really, really helpful. Very critical area to know about, especially with the way things are these days. And I think it was very helpful to have that. Thanks to everybody who participated or listened in or watched our session today. This is actually for recording. This is our last session. We have now all 6 sessions that will be available as part of our summit. I did want to let you know that if you'd like to connect with us and get more information, there's a QR code on the screen. And if you wish to do that, we certainly would love to have to be able to help give you more information, move forward in some other areas if possible. There's also a survey, a 3-question survey. We're always interested in what you like about our these sessions. If you see room for improvement, if there are other things that you'd like to see, other subjects, if you'd like to see those. Just a 3-question survey. We would love to hear from you. But if you do need more information, please access the QR code, and we would love to offer more information. Thanks again for our participants today. Great discussion forum, and onward. And thanks again. Really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.